Welcome to Let's Talk Love. Today's episode is for all of our single listeners out there. I had an intriguing conversation with Dr. Christie Kederian. Dr. Christie is an experienced matchmaker, marriage and family therapist. She's worked for eHarmony and now specializes as a date doctor. She helps singles learn and integrate skills and strategy, as well as soulful practices into their dating lives. We talked today about some effective ways to date online, how to use the apps to your benefit, how to approach dating with an open, curious mind, while also being discerning about what you really want in a partnership. I hope this episode gives you new tools to use in your dating journey. Enjoy. Welcome to Let's Talk Love, the podcast that brings you real talk, fresh ideas, and expert insights every week. Our guests are the most trusted voices in love and relationships, and they're here for you with tools, information, and friendly advice to help you expand the ways you love, relate, and communicate. We tackle the big questions, not shying away from the complex, the messy, the awkward, and the joyful parts of relationships. I'm your host, Robin Ducharme. Now, let's talk love. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Love. Today, we are going to talk all about love and dating with Dr. Christie Kederian. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Christie.
Thank you so much for having me, Robin.
We've been following you and learning from you for a while. Your Instagram is the Date Dr. Christie, and I'm just so excited to have you and talk about obviously my favorite thing, which is love. And you are a matchmaker and a psychologist first and foremost. And you have experience, just everything to do with dating and loving and relating. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So Dr. Christie, tell us about your background of studying psychology and how that also moved into you becoming a matchmaker and dating expert.
From a really young age, I felt like I was always fascinated by relationships, both pieces of my identity, both my cultural identity as Armenian and my faith background as a Christian are really centered in those relationships. So I feel like relationships and how my family impacted me, my community, all really fascinated me throughout growing up. So I studied psychology in undergrad. And then my last year, right before I was graduating, I started doing some research in the family studies lab at USC and took a course on marriage and family therapy. And all of a sudden everything clicked because it was more about how our relationships really help us develop as humans and who we are, and less about how just what's happening internally. It was like, we are kind of the product of the relationships that we have around us. And that just made so much sense to me. So I pursued a career in marriage and family therapy, saw all sorts of people, but all in context of the relationships with themselves, with others. And then I started working at eHarmony as a professional matchmaker. We were all therapists there. So we were really helping people kind of with the internal stuff, but also actually meeting people. So it was the perfect blend of the inner work and the outer work, what I call like the soul work and the strategy. And then I worked there. I also worked for another company that worked on the inside of a lot of Match.com dating apps. So I kind of learned all about the dating app world. At the same time, I was also single and dating. The first time I downloaded a dating app was the night before I started eHarmony, because I was like, oh, I should probably know what I'm doing when I start working for a dating app. So I kind of went through this parallel process with so many of my clients and learned so much personally. So now in our business and company, I feel like my personal experience as well as my professional experience and research really found this beautiful intersection. And I felt really empowered wanting to help women especially, but we work with all people, really figure out what those blocks are to why they're not having success in their relationships, where most of the people we work with are very successful in other areas of their lives. They have a fulfilling, successful career. They have great friendships, they have travel, they have all these things they love, but for some reason they're not translating into this area. So that's what we really feel passionate and called to do. And so that's a little bit of my story.
Oh, excellent. So I would like to know more about your experience at eHarmony. How were you working as a matchmaker there? And so were you helping build the apps or actually how, like the matching? Because there is obviously there's a lot of science that goes into the apps, right?
Exactly. So when I worked there, they actually had a totally separate program within eHarmony that was people facing. So we actually worked with clients that wanted kind of more of that personal touch experience. So we used the algorithm, we used their compatible matches, but we went on the dates essentially for them virtually or in person. And as therapists, we were able to really identify, what are some of these red flags? Are you really compatible with this person? And we were able to get to our clients and help kind of coach them along the process. So we would connect them with people that were already in, their compatible matches, but this was a way for them outsourcing the dating process essentially to experts that were able to kind of ask some of those questions that you don't necessarily always feel comfortable asking, but are important. And then also after they go on the dates, we did what's called post-date feedback. So we were able to come back to the clients in real time and say, hey, like you think you're coming across this way to this person, but actually this is the experience they had of you. And that's just so valuable because oftentimes we don't know why we got ghosted or we don't know why things are happening. And then getting that insight is so, so valuable too. So it was kind of for people that wanted that more of a personal touch, a human experience with an expert.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, in I want to say 2012, I studied with, I became a matchmaker. So I am a certified matchmaker and I did that for a number of years. That is, and I also worked as a dating coach. And that is one of I think, having that feedback piece that a lot of us we don't have that opportunity, right? To see or hear from the other side, how did I or you show up on that date? Because that's incredible. They were able to do that for people. You learn a lot about yourself.
And it's brave of so many of our clients that want to put themselves in that position because sometimes we're so afraid of that honest feedback, whether we're in relationships or dating. Like we don't really want to hear if there is anything constructive or potentially useful. And so I think that it's bringing that insight is so powerful because that could be the catalyst to really finding love. If you're willing to say, hey, like, how am I being perceived? What do I actually need to work on? That's one of the things that I think is missing when people are dating is the understanding that dating is really a skill and there's nothing wrong with you. Like you're not like, undesirable. We make all these stories up, but really you just have to learn how to date and be yourself and be your best self on a date. And it's a skill like anything else. And so I feel really passionate about empowering people with that and not them internalizing it because that's what we do. We say, oh, well, it didn't work out, so I must not be pretty enough or thin enough or whatever, but you're making this whole narrative up that's probably not true. Maybe you just didn't ask the right questions or you came off kind of guarded and they thought you weren't interested or whatever. And so it can be really freeing for a lot of people to get that feedback.
Oh, I completely agree. I think about when you said that about skill, it's the same thing about relationships. Like we don't learn how to be in intimate partnerships. And there's so much like beyond our parents, let's say, or our primary caregivers, right? Yes. And a lot of us didn't come from primary caregivers that had really solid, beautiful, loving relationships. Yes. So if your modeling isn't, and even that, you may not have a lot of those skills. And there's so many skills, communication skills, conflict management skills, vulnerability, like all these things can be learned.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Oh no, I was just going to say the analogy I use is like you're taking a class, like you're wanting a PhD in chemistry, but all your classes are in biology. If the model you saw was not the right fit, you're kind of expecting a degree in something that you're not studying. So you have to just know that you came in with these lessons that you might not want to mirror, but that's all you know when it comes to relationships. So it's about relearning that and figuring out, okay, what do I need to unlearn so that I can build a relationship that I do desire.
Right. And so you touched on this one just a little bit earlier about how when you're looking for a loving partnership, there's the soulful piece and the strategy work.
Mm-hmm.
So can you break that down for us and how you coach on those two pieces?
Sure. So oftentimes when people come to us, they have already done a lot of inner work. So they say, well, I'm in therapy, so I shouldn't really need to learn about dating. And I am a therapist, so I think therapy is amazing. And I think sometimes people can sometimes hide behind therapy and not put themselves out there because they think they need to, quote unquote, fully heal, whatever that means. Like, I'm not ready for a relationship, but I really believe that healing happens in the context of relationships. So oftentimes, Ram Dass has this quote that it's like, if you want to really be enlightened, go spend a week with your family, right? So when you're alone and you
right?
kind of do that work and you have nobody triggering you, then, oh, sure. And we see this a lot when we do attachment work. It's like, oh, I'm secure for sure. I'm secure attachment, but I haven't dated in 10 years. So I haven't given myself the opportunity to have that anxiety or that avoidance show up. So what I believe is really being supported in your healing journey, but also putting in the work and doing, putting yourself out there, so to speak. So the soul work really has to do with understanding who you are as a dater. A lot of people know about themselves in various ways, but they don't really understand how those things translate into the context of dating. So what we do is create what we call a dating blueprint. We help them understand their attachment when it comes to being a single person and trying to connect with people. And then we also go into their personality. I use the Enneagram, and that combination helps give us a really customized approach to, like, you should be dating a certain way, not necessarily how your friend is dating, not necessarily how you've done it in the past, but because of your unique wiring, your upbringing, all of those things, you have a direct path. You should be on a certain dating app. You should be going about it in a certain way so that it's aligned for you. A lot of people think that dating or online dating isn't right for them because they're going about it in a way that is completely counterintuitive to who they are, how they're wired, their experiences, all of that. So we really help them kind of unravel some of those things and have that awareness so then they can move into the action piece.
Oh, I love that. So you're helping people build, you called a dating blueprint, and they're doing a personality test. Those are two of the things that I really appreciate that approach, that it is customizable. Like, not one size fits all. So if you're more of an introvert, well, it all has to do with strategy and skills. And there's nothing, and I think also this idea that, this person's going to just appear in your life out of nowhere. Like we like to believe in fairy tales, like that's not happening. And it's okay to have strategy towards something that you really want in your life, which is a partnership. Exactly. It doesn't have to take away from the beauty of it. Right? Mm-hmm. Having strategy.
Yeah.
It's a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm. People get really caught up in the story of how they meet somebody when the reality is you want the ending of the story to be a lot better than the beginning. And I think that's because of romantic comedies, Hallmark, I love a good Hallmark movie, but it sets us up to think that the person we just randomly run into at a coffee shop is going to be compatible with us. And when we look at the research, which is what I really ground all of my work in, only 8% of people that meet in a bar end up in a long-term relationship. So by just kind of showing up somewhere, you might meet somebody, you might even be in a relationship with them, but is that the compatible person for you? No, probably not. And that's where we end up in relationships that aren't satisfying because we're not doing that work ahead of time.
Yes. So I heard you say, that 78%, is it 78% now of people are meeting online?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, after 2021, meeting online is now the number one way to meet someone. And it surpassed what previously was the number one way, is to meeting through friends, which I also love that, like friends introducing. Yes. But that's now the second way. And the number one way is now meeting through an online dating app.
Wow. So tell us about your experience meeting your husband online. I would love to hear the strategy you took, Dr. Christie. So first of all, like, what app were you on? Because I know there's not only one app. I'm not here to narrow down apps, but there's so many.
Totally.
But also, what was your strategy? Like, how did you write your profile, and how did this all? I know you knew your husband from when you were like, you've had some history there from when you were really, really young, but how you met, I would love to hear that, because obviously you're an expert in this and you had a strategy.
Yeah, totally. So we initially met when we were kids, actually in vacation Bible school. I was 5, he was 10. And
Wow.
the way that we know that was that our parents knew each other from there. So that's the way that we knew. I don't really remember him, but we both moved away, went off to college, et cetera, and moved back to our hometown. And so what the funny thing that I always mention is that if we didn't have the dating apps, we probably crossed each other. I mean, we lived in the same town, probably went to the same coffee shop. I wrote my whole dissertation at the coffee shop that was down the street from where he lived. So, I mean, we could have met in that way at any time, but the dating app really put us in front of each other. So we actually met on Bumble, which is, I love all the dating apps and help people kind of navigate which one's the right one for them. But I personally loved that app, especially at the time with my strategy, because I felt like I was really busy. I was tempted to put off dating because I was in the middle of my doctorate. And I'm like, okay, I was coming out of a situationship. And I was like, I don't really have time to date. But some friends said, okay, this could be kind of a positive thing for you to get you to your dissertation defense, which is a few months later. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, like I'll have something positive to look forward to in my break. So, the approach that I love that Bumble took was it wasn't going to waste my time with random people messaging me at all times, which some of the dating apps allow that. But I really wanted people within my criteria to be the only ones that I would see and message. So I use, and this is a hack that I tell all my clients, sometimes you need to use the paid version of the app to be very narrow and specific for what you're looking for. So I was using the paid version of Bumble. And then I saw, my now husband's profile. A few of the things that I always look for, obviously, that the values that were important to me. So those came up as his filters and his photos. He had photos with his family. So he had like one with his dad, one with his nieces and nephews. You can't really see their faces, but he was doing things with them. And that was a really important value to me too. I always tell a lot of my clients that your photos, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but especially for men, that the photos often tell more about them than what they're writing in the profile, because it shows like what their life looks like. And that was very aligned. Like his life right now, even together, is all about like centered around his family. And that was also a very important value of mine too. So that was one of the initial things that kind of sparked that for me. And I felt like I could have known him. I was like, he looks familiar. So anyway, we matched from there, had our first date, and then kind of the rest was history. But I always say, like, we really should have met in various ways, through our family, through our community, through just running into each other. But it was the dating app that helped us actually have that connection, because he always says, like, I probably would have never approached you at the coffee shop. You're always like on your computer. And nowadays people don't even know if you're single or not. So a lot of that connection doesn't really happen. So I credit Bumble all the time for our love story actually finding its real true start.
Oh, that's so great. And so tell us, I'm interested in that story around what did you put in your profile? Like, how did you write it? And like, cause you do say, like, this is not about writing a big essay, right? Like you want people to be, like, authentic, true, upfront, and concise. And also, second question is, how did you share your values? And like, what did you put as values? And how did you know that you're beyond your husband's pictures? How did you know that your values were? Because I think this is really, these are really important strategies with online dating.
So with my profile, and I tell everybody to do this, in the front section, and this is specifically with Bumble, some profiles are different, I basically put kind of a little synopsis, where I'm from, a little bit about what I do. I had that I was a therapist on there, not that I was a matchmaker. And a lot of people in certain professions are always wondering, like, should I put that front center? Should I not? But I had that I was a therapist, and I say, this is kind of who I work with at the time. And then I had like a few hobbies, things that I really enjoy. enjoyed. So I'm a musician. I wrote that. I love like hiking with a matcha in hand. So I kind of colored the picture a little bit. And that also helped connect us too, because it gave some details, like the type of place I like hiking in LA, or, the type of pet I have, like little details kind of helped us to spark the conversation. Then what I did, and I always recommend this too, is choosing prompts that allow for conversation. So one of the prompts I chose was 2 truths and a lie, because that's just like an easy conversation starter, and it's like funny. So I think one of my my truth that was could have been a lie, people thought was a lie a lot of times, was that I met Arnold Schwarzenegger when I was 7 in a luggage store, and that was the truth, but it's a lie. But I got a lot of people would comment that, like, tell me that story, right? People love like a story and to connect. So that was one of my prompts as well. And my photos, and I also put in that initial space, my faith background, my cultural background. I just even put a little emoji. But in my photos, I put like a picture of myself doing something connected to my culture and community. So that was also another signal of like, oh, okay, this person really cares about their culture as an Armenian. I put myself traveling, which was also really important to me. And photos of myself like smiling and just like what I generally look like, my personality. And those things really aligned with my husband. He also put something culturally connected as well as his faith background. And so those things really kind of connected us initially.
Oh, excellent. So you say keep your profile short, right? Tell me, did you put that you were looking for a partner and you wanted kids? And would you recommend somebody like just say that, right? I say like be upfront, because this is really like a weeding out process. Like you're trying to find your needle in a haystack, really. And why not be completely upfront and honest about what you are looking for in a partner, so that like anybody that's not in that, like they're just not even going to be messaging you.
Totally. Yeah. I
Right?
recommend, and specifically with Bumble, but a lot of apps do this. If you have the paid version, you can just put, wants kids, wants marriage. And sometimes people shy away from putting words like that. They'll put the kind of softer version. So open to kids, or wants a relationship, which is fine. But if you're consistently attracting people that say they want kids and want a relationship, but then when you meet them, they're not really interested in that commitment, then I would go narrow in your filters. Say wants marriage, wants kids. And then what we recommend doing through our methodology is on your first FaceTime or first date, asking questions around those specific topics in a way that's like direct, but not aggressive. So one question I recommend asking is like, yeah, what do you want your life to look like in the next 5 years? And if for you know that you need to have kids or whatever it is within that amount of time, and they don't mention that, then that's your sign to also ask a follow-up, like, oh, okay, like, do you see kids in your future? I know you put that, you can even use what they put on the app. Like, I know you said you're open to kids on your profile, do you see kids in your future? And then they have the opportunity to say, yeah, but not now, or whatever. But one thing that I saw so many times in couples therapy, pre-engagement counseling, when I was doing that primarily, is that you want to be on the same page. Maya Angelou says, when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. So if someone's not sure if they want kids and you definitely want kids, that's not a fit. You don't want to wait around and see if they'll change their mind. I've coached and worked with couples that were both unsure, and then one ended up wanting kids and one ended up not wanting kids. And then that relationship didn't work out. So if you are sure about what you're looking for and you meet someone who's not sure, then that's automatically not a fit.
Definitely. So I would like to talk about the list because I know when I was working as a matchmaker and love coach, I would be interviewing people and right away they come in with, these are the things I want in a partner. And so many times it was the physical attributes and not so much about really what you're looking for in your long-term partnership with somebody, which really matters, right? Their character, their values. Totally. So how are you helping people discern what really is the most important things for a healthy partnership beyond the list? And maybe it's a list, but it's yeah.
Yeah,
Something
so
different.
we think of it and frame it as like a sandwich. So we call it the criteria sandwich. So pretend you're going to Subway or, your favorite sandwich place and you're building your sandwich. When you create your sandwich, the bread, the bottom bun, the top bun, these are the thinnest parts of the sandwich, right? So this is similar to like your deal breakers and what I call your must-haves. So you don't want too many because we don't want to carb load the sandwich. So really, you should only be having like 2 or 3 things that are guiding and kind of bookending your list, so to speak, that are non-negotiable. So, and those should be values based. They can't be like their height or things that are surface level or could change. And so once you build your bottom bun, then in your middle section, which is your like to haves, these are things that this would be great, but this doesn't really have so much to do with compatibility, long-term relationship, if they're worthy of that. So you can put as many things as you want. They like hiking, they like traveling, whatever. Those are all great things. But they don't really, from a research standpoint, tell us if you guys are going to go the distance. So, and then you get to the top of your sandwich, and that's the top bun criteria. So I recommend using these 2 or 3 things to guide who you swipe right and left on. So if it's your faith background, if it's their career, or that they're at some kind of the same level of lifestyle, whatever it is, you can choose whatever you want, but you can only have 1 or 2 things. And then from that point, as you get to know somebody, then you can start asking deeper questions to assess compatibility. But right off the bat, using your values to guide that is really what's going to help you get to people that are the right fit. And you're not confusing yourself with 1,000 things and trying to figure out, how am I going to ask, if they meet all this criteria. Instead, you're just focusing on, okay, they meet these 2 things. Now let me just connect and see if there's that chemistry and connection.
So how do you get people to get super clear on what their must-haves are and what they really like? Because I think some people are like, oh, this person has to be like this, and it's like, well, and it's like almost convincing them, like, no, that's not actually what's the most important thing for a healthy partnership.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you get people to understand the top of the bun or bottom of the bun? Like, what are the deal breakers and what are the must-haves?
Mm-hmm. So they really revolve around 3 things. Number 1 are your values. So if you know that you have specific values, whether that's a faith background, a worldview, whatever, cultural, they have to align there. The second thing is a vision for the future. Have to have the same vision for the future. If we're going, we're trying to take a trip to London, and one person's going to Paris and you're trying to go to London, you guys can't go together, right? So if they don't have the same vision for the future as you, then it's not a fit. The third thing is the lifestyle. So how they see their lifestyle, how they live their lifestyle. These are areas that also could not be a fit, could not be compatible with you. If you see your lifestyle as like you're a sailor and you want to sail around the world, and they have like a dental practice and have to be in the same city forever, or however long they work, that's a lifestyle clash. So those are the areas that you can see kind of those non-negotiables and compatibility. From a research standpoint, actually, the more similar you are to a potential partner, the more compatible you are. So it goes against the whole feeling of opposites attract. And it's more like, actually, if we're similar in our values, our education, our financial status, then we're more likely to make a happy, healthy, long-term relationship.
Excellent. So I've heard you say something about silver bullet. Can you explain that to us? What does that mean? And how does this apply to, this applies to online dating as well as just dating in general, right?
Totally. Yeah. So the silver bullet swipe is kind of that from your top bun. Let's say you have 3 things. The silver bullet swipe is like, if they have this one thing, it's always going right. So one of the things I work with people on is sometimes if you're afraid of relationships, you tend to be a little bit more avoidant. Everything feels like a left swipe. They're wearing a weird shirt in this picture, or I don't know, their teeth are a little crooked in this picture as I zoom in. So we're kind of looking for everything that's wrong with the person on a profile. when we're kind of dehumanizing them. Maybe if you met that person in real life, you'd actually think that they're attractive, or they'd be wearing a different shirt, and that wouldn't be, a potential red flag or whatever it is. So we're really training people to say, okay, if they meet this value, automatically right swipe, and then I can get to know more details about them. So we're kind of retraining ourselves to not just see one thing and say it's not a fit, and actually getting to know somebody and becoming more humanistic, I guess, in the process of online dating. So that could be various things. It could be like, okay, they have a certain education level, or they have a certain job or career, like they have a job, or they have a faith background important to you, or they say they want kids or want marriage. So those things are kind of those pillars. And then in the messages on the date, we can learn a little bit more.
Nice. So what are some of things you could say to people like, these are like clear red flags? Because we hear that term a lot, right? And sometimes it's like, it's not a red flag, or maybe it really clearly is a red flag. This is where you would be like saying to your clients, it's just steer clear. Go the other direction here. What would you recommend? What would you say are like some clear red flags to watch out for?
Yeah. So I kind of separate red flags into two categories. One are like personal red flags. So it's like for you, that's not a fit, but for somebody else, could make a good relationship. So that's like one category. So like, let's say you have a faith background and they don't have that. That's just automatic, like no for you, like red flag, not going to be a good partnership. Then there are red flags that this person's really not a good fit for anybody at this time. Like they're not a good fit for a relationship in general at this time. One of those things that I recommend that sometimes, is controversial to some people, but I think that they need to fully be out of marriage. So if they're separated, or, they're staying married because of various reasons, and sometimes they're good reasons, someone's on their insurance, etc., and you want to be married, you want to be in that commitment, then for me, that's a red flag. Maybe a few years down the road, they might be out of that relationship and ready. You might want to consider it then. But I've seen so many people kind of start that type of relationship, and then it just never gets to what they're looking for, similar to what I mentioned before. A general red flag, I would say, is untreated mental health struggles. So they say, I'm whatever, bipolar, et cetera. And then you ask, what are you doing to work through that, process it? Are you working with therapist, psychiatrist, doctor? They don't do anything. That's a red flag, because when it's not treated and it feels like maybe it feels manageable at some point, later down the road, we don't know what we'll experience, circumstances, different triggers. And we also know from the fields of epigenetics that any type of outside stressor can turn on a gene. So it's like, let's say they don't really struggle with anxiety or depression that much, or right now, later on in your life, as things happen, that could turn on that gene. And then if they're not getting the help, or they're against getting that type of help, that could be really catastrophic for a relationship. There's a lot of different signs and things people talk about around like love bombing and that sort of thing. Sometimes those are harder to see right off the bat. So it's not necessarily like an automatic red flag if they send you flowers after a date. So those things are a little bit more contextual. But obviously, if there's any type of personality disorder, narcissism, whatever, that's a red flag, because it's characterological. It's not like a pattern they can shift with their behavior or getting some work on. It's more like this is how they've learned to survive in the world. And there's not space for that deeper intimacy and connection. They're not able to meet the needs of somebody else. And then I say a general red flag is like, if they don't want to, if they don't like you, if they don't want to commit to you, that's a red flag. So, they could have all of the things on your criteria and your list, but if they're not committing to you, they're not showing you that consistent communication, they're not progressing the relationship, they're kind of stringing you along, red flag. So those are kind of some of my automatic ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've heard you say this before, which is just solid advice, is the consistency, right? And communication and attention, and how you're actually communicating to each other. right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I always say it's that consistent communication over time that tells you who somebody is. A lot of times people will go on the best first date ever. This is the reason I recommend the first dates aren't very long, but oh, I went on this amazing first date for 4 or 5 hours. Amazing. And what's their communication and consistency like 5 dates down the road, 10 dates down the road? That's really what we're looking for. Even if you had the best first date ever, I want to see them on the 5th date and the 6th date. That's how you're able to decipher some of those patterns that aren't healthy.
so how are you recommending people navigate if they, let's say they go on a first date and it's like, yeah, it was okay. First of all, how are you recommending people set up their first date? Are you recommending just like a coffee, a walk? And then how are you helping people decide, okay, I'd like to see this person again? Like maybe it's just like, it didn't blow my socks off, but
Yeah.
I could meet this person again. Like I would love to hear your recommendation on that.
Yeah, so we kind of walk people through the process for online dating of like assessing their profile, figuring out we have our method is 5 messages to meet on the messages. So you're not messaging for like 2 weeks. You're really kind of getting the main questions answered. And then we still recommend a FaceTime, what I call vibe check. So just like saying hello, making sure that they pass that vibe check. Doesn't have to be a full on date like we were experiencing in COVID, but just like, hey, hello, making sure that there's that connection. So you're not wasting time and energy if there isn't. And then the first date, I recommend it being like short and sweet, no more than 90 minutes. It could be like a coffee at a cute cafe, a coffee and a walk, a little whatever picnic, nothing, no long dinner, no, hike, nothing like that. And just leaving the checklist at home. Hopefully you've gotten all your questions answered throughout that process and just noticing how you feel around that person. So did you show up to the date exhausted and then all of a sudden you're feeling alive and energetic? Great to pay attention to. Are they doing little things that you feel like, oh, that's like a sweet gesture, holding the door, offering to tip, whatever, things like that. And then after the first date, you want to create time for reflection. So if you feel like you're not attracted to them or interested in them on the date, don't play that card, because I can't tell you how many times I've gotten feedback from, on a date that, oh, it seemed like the girl wasn't interested. I got that feedback from the date. And then I talked to her and she's like, oh, actually I was interested. But right, automatically you read like, oh, I don't think he's that attractive or whatever. So that causes your date to shut down. They're not their best self. You are in your head thinking, oh, do I think he's attractive or not? You're like assessing and analyzing the situation. So you just want to have the mindset of like, okay, I'm going to pretend I like this person, fake it till I make it until after the date. Then I can give myself the chance to have a second date or not. So many times women feel like, oh, I should have given myself the opportunity. They wish they did, but then they had already felt like, oh, I don't think I was interested on the date, but that could have been for various reasons. So after the first date is when I recommend reflecting on if you want a second date. If you don't feel that automatic spark and chemistry, I think that's a great sign that they're probably a healthy potential partner. Most of the time for women, they feel that around date 7. So you want to give yourself that time to build that chemistry. For men, they usually feel it a little bit earlier. So if you're automatically feeling like, okay, I'm not attracted to them, or there's not something that's keeping me curious to keep going, then it might not be a fit for you.
So you're saying most women don't feel chemistry until date 7?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So all throughout kind of like the first few dates, you're not really sure about somebody. And that's for a variety of reasons, physiologically and psychologically, but that's the average time. So when people, especially women, tell me, oh, I didn't feel it on the first date, I'm like, you're not really supposed to. That's natural, because you're a lot more guarded. You're assessing a lot. You're analyzing a lot. And so you're not really going to feel fully like yourself and feeling that full connection and chemistry until later on in the process.
Yes. Wow. So let's talk about patterns and doing our best not to repeat old patterns, right? Because, we've all been majority of us have been in more than one or more relationships. Mm-hmm. And if relationships didn't work out, and here you are dating, you're trying to find a really healthy, beautiful partnership. And in the past, like you got stuck being this way or having this pattern that's just like a repeat. And you're like, gosh darn it, I do not want to repeat that pattern in the next relationship. And so how are you helping everybody that you're coaching and working with to really identify those patterns? And like you said, we heal together, right? With another person. So you don't really know, like, unless you're in that relationship with somebody and then maybe you are repeating that pattern again. You know what I'm saying, Christy?
Exactly. Yeah. And so we have a few different ways that we help people kind of identify this, but this happens throughout the process. People kind of overly focus and think that patterns only have to do with when I choose the person, but really they will come up all throughout your dating and relationship journey. And what we really teach is to kind of somatically approach knowing the difference between your actual healthy intuition, gut feeling, this has to do with this relationship, and your like past relationship trauma or, experiences. So sometimes we're operating off of a past relationship and triggered or upset about things that don't really have to do with the person in front of us. It's more of because of what we've experienced. And so we want to really be very clear within our own body, kind of where we're feeling that, where that's coming from. So we're able to accurately identify, you know what, that's my old stuff or that's my stuff. And that's not about this person. That's not about you. And it's really identifying the difference between like facts and how you're feeling. So I always say, go back to the facts. If you feel like, oh, I think this person's cheating on me or seeing somebody else, let's go back to the facts. Have they done XYZ or whatever? And then you can identify, oh, actually that's my ex. Like that's a lot more of what they were doing. And this person hasn't given me any facts to make me feel like that's the case. So we really kind of want to identify the difference with that and know what your triggers are. So you can say, is this old stuff or is this really something I need to work on with this person?
Yes. Oh, I really like that. So it has, like you said, it's getting into your body, understanding yourself. I really like the idea about reflecting and journaling and just fact checking is what is actually really happening in the present moment here. Yeah. And hopefully just the more you do that, like the more you trust yourself, and get to know yourself on those deeper levels, like I think the better decisions you're going to make, right?
Totally. Yeah. In every area of your life. And then you're going to be able to really heal from the past and not let your past dictate your present and future relationships.
Yeah. So you, I'm sure I got this from your Instagram, but you said a Match.com study in 2021 found the number one thing people are looking for in a potential partner is emotional maturity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, right, you're saying people's values have changed, and for dating, that means they care more about emotional maturity, connection, and intelligence, and less about how people appear on the outside. Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Christie, tell us, how are you helping people see or know if somebody like is emotionally mature?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. And that was one of the positives I think came out of COVID dating, is like we couldn't really meet in person. So we were asking deeper questions. We were getting to know people kind of on that deeper level and valuing those things a lot more. So I think that's one of the positive things that came out of COVID dating. But what's really important to keep in mind is that everyone is carrying, like we just talked about, their own stories from their childhood, from their past relationships and experiences. So as you're assessing emotional maturity, obviously first you really want to work on yourself, figuring out, okay, how can I communicate and understand myself in a clear, concise way that's not bringing all my past baggage with me. There's a lot of communication involved in emotional maturity, and also a lot of understanding, acceptance, and awareness about where you're coming from and where they're coming from. Emotional maturity and developing that kind of emotional intelligence is really an inside job. So if someone's giving you signs that they're not quite there yet, it's not your job to say, hey, use your words, or hey, are you really this because of your past relationship or whatever. Like, you're not their mom, you're not their teacher. So the best way to really understand that is their ability to communicate, to identify their emotions and communicate them clearly to you, so you understand who they are as a person. The second thing really has to do with integrity. Are they who they say they are? Do their actions match with their words? Are they able to identify if they're wrong. Like, are they able to say sorry, ask for forgiveness? Some of these basic things that a lot of people don't do. They haven't built that muscle. They haven't been taught those things. So they either are self-taught and maybe not very well, like we were talking about, or they really kind of go through life and relationships not having that communication and real true connection. So we really kind of just want to pay attention to if people have done that work and focus on working on yourself, because you can't do that work for somebody else. They really have to, kind of reparent themselves in some ways to be able to have the language to speak about their inner world and emotional experience in dating and relationships.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. I was just looking at a post that Paul Brunson, I don't know if you know Paul Brunson, but he's just so great. And he talks about his relationship with Jill, his wife, of a long time. And he was posting just yesterday about intimacy and how his marker of true intimacy is like just being able to be fully vulnerable with somebody, like continuously, constantly over time. Like that is just such a beautiful example of intimacy. And I thought about that, like if you're with somebody and it takes a lot, I think it would, and that's the other thing I'm sure you're coaching people with, is really it takes time for somebody to earn your trust and your vulnerability. What about that, Dr. Christie?
Yeah, I love what Paul said and Brene Brown's work about like vulnerability just being like earned. Like it's not just randomly posting a rant that your therapist really needs to read on Facebook. That's not vulnerability. True vulnerability is that connection, making sure someone's a safe place, and then being able to open up and kind of peel back those layers. The way that I really recommend singles who are like looking for that kind of safe relationship to start working on that now is creating relationships in your community, friendships, whatever, that feel how you want your intimate romantic relationship to feel. So you really want to find those people. A lot of times safety is built in the context of like we're creating this relationship together, but some people have to have safe things about them already. They already have to have that work being done. They already have to be able to be a safe person and then grow with you in that safety. So if you're kind of hoping you can be vulnerable with someone that hasn't built that ability to, hold your space, they're trustworthy, not intentionally, but they just don't have that safety built into them, then you're kind of barking up the wrong tree there. So you have to find people who have that emotional maturity, that ability to be vulnerable and hold space for other people's needs while getting their needs met, however they need to get them met, and then building those relationships. And then when you are looking for a partner who has those same qualities, you'll be able to recognize it. Because if you don't have any safe relationships where you're emotionally intimate or whatever with any friendships, then how are you going to attract that healthy relationship elsewhere? You won't really know what it looks like because it's not already in your life. So look for building those safe friendships and other relationships, and then that's going to follow.
I really I love that message. And I've heard you say this before, Christy, around what you are looking for in a partner. Hopefully, and I think this aligns with what you just said, you're already embodying those things. Mm-hmm. You're not looking for somebody that doesn't so let's say you don't have this, but you want somebody to be that, bring that into your life. Yeah, exactly. I've heard you give the example of, I'm not, let's just say somebody's I'm financially, I'm just not strong at all. I can't keep track of finances. I'm terrible at investing. I want to find somebody who is financially stable and who is just going to bring that into our relationship. And when you're coming at it from a place of lack, so can you explain that concept, please?
Yeah, totally. Exactly what you said. It's like we're kind of looking for, through osmosis, that the work that we really have to do individually, we're kind of looking through osmosis to have a partner do that for us. So we're like, hey, I'm not really good at this, or I'm, this isn't my strong suit. I'm weak. I have a weakness around this. So I want someone to kind of come in and fulfill that part of me that I feel unfulfilled in myself. And what that creates, first of all, people think that's going to create the perfect, compatibility, but what it actually creates is that lack or feeling like, okay, I'm not like good enough. And you kind of make your identity around, I'm not good at this, that, or the other, versus if you're on your own journey, doesn't mean you have to be at the end of the road or the finish line with it. But if you're on your own journey, you're learning financial literacy, for example, or you're on a health journey, and then you meet somebody on the way who's going that same direction, that's what's going to lead to that relationship that you desire, not I'm all the way over here and they're all the way over here, because that's also going to create that lifestyle incompatibility that we talked about, versus saying, okay, you know what? I really want someone who's financially stable. What can I do right now to build that up in myself? What can I, either learn, or what can I grow in myself so that when that person comes, we're going to be going on the same path in that direction?
Yes. I think this whole conversation has reminded me as well, and I'm sure you talk to your clients about this, is that we have to put so much more emphasis on ourselves. And rather than looking outside of us for that person that's going to bring way more into our lives. Right.
Totally.
And
Exactly.
it just changes the whole narrative. It changes the whole mindset. Even when you show up on a date, it's like, and I'm not talking about from this ego place, but it's like, actually, I come to the table with a lot. And I bring so much love, so much of, maybe you're so close to your friends and family. You've got, you've worked really hard. You've got a good career. You've got a lot that you offer another person if you were to be their partner. Coming at it from that place rather than, oh, I really hope this person likes me. Or, it's just such a different way to show up.
Totally. Yeah. And that's the work when you're in a relationship too. I say that all the time. It's like,
Yes.
you so often
Yes.
become a really big question I would always get asked is like, hey, I'm having relationship problems, but my partner doesn't want to come to therapy. So what do I do? And I always say, you come to therapy. We can always work on relationships. And it starts with you. It starts with the work that you're doing, because relationships are that dance. It's the dynamic. If you're changing, if you start two-stepping and they're still tangoing, that dance isn't going to work. So it's really about kind of understanding, okay, what can I do and what can I focus on, rather than, okay, how is the other person going to help me or help my life or whatever. And we do a lot of this work also in dating. I always ask my clients, when we're thinking about yellow flags or red flags, what are your red flags? What are your yellow flags? Start working on those things and feeling like, hey, actually, I wouldn't want someone to disqualify me because of this thing that on paper I might be disqualifying somebody else for. We often reject other people in ways that we also reject ourselves. So it's really understanding the whole process is the mirror, and this is the work we have to do ourselves. And there's not a finish line to it. It's not okay, once I do this, then magically the right person will come. It's really about consistently, daily doing that work on yourself, and also attracting and being in relationships that they're doing that work too.
Oh my gosh, I really like that. I love making a list of your own yellow, red flag, your own green, yellow, and red flags. That's so good.
Oh yeah, because it's you feel like you're a great partner, you've worked through all these things, but if somebody else just looked at you like that on paper, they might be like, oh, maybe not, maybe a yellow, red flag. So that's really important to kind of humanize each other through the process.
Yeah. So tell us, Dr. Christie, about how people can continue working with you. I know you're talking about coaching clients. So can people sign up to work with you one-on-one, or is it a group? How does it work?
Yeah, so we basically offer our group program. That's kind of the main way that we work with most people. We walk people through our methodology, and you have a lot of individual support via texting and kind of our group support, as well as actual calls where we're training, answering calls. We're swiping with you and for you. It's a very hands-on program. It's called Find the One. So it's a 3-month program. We walk through kind of the mindset, the inner work, the soul work, the actual strategy. We go through your blueprint and we say, okay, this is actually what you need to be doing. And then we also walk you through our 10 dates to soulmate roadmap. So it's kind of going from that first date to knowing okay, this potential, this option has the future of being a soulmate type of person. And then We kind of give you, these are the questions to ask on this date. This is the type of date to go on to really learn about someone's character. A lot of times on the list, people come with things that are really character based, like, oh, I want them to be, kind and generous, but obviously you can't ask that right on a first date. Like, are you generous? Like, you have to learn about a person. So we're kind of giving people those interpersonal tools to figure that out through the dating process. So that's our group program. And we also have individual ways to work with me and our coaches as well. So if you don't fit the demographic, that program's primarily for like women, then we're able to work with you individually as well with coaching services too.
Oh my gosh. Well, it sounds like just such a comprehensive way to go about it and effective. Like, I love the strategy and the soul part of it. Of course, it's all, and like you say that there's, you can't control the chemistry and you can't control the timing. And I appreciate that too. Like there is the mystery in our lives that thank goodness there is that part. We can't control everything, right? Even if we tried. So there is that magic piece, but there's strategy that can help you get there faster. That's what I think, totally. Right?
Mm-hmm. I always say there are things that you can work on. So focus on those things rather than the things that you can't control.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Christie, for being here today and for sharing all of your wisdom and all of the gifts of strategy that I'm sure that people are listening are going to follow. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was so fun.
Please visit realloveready.com to become a member of our community. Submit your relationship questions for our podcast experts at reallovereadypodcast@gmail.com. We read everything you send. Be sure to rate and review this podcast. Your feedback helps us get you the relationship advice and guidance you need. The Real Love Ready podcast is recorded and edited by Maya Anstey. Transcriptions by otter.ai and edited by Maya Anstey. We at Real Love Ready acknowledge and express gratitude for the Coast Salish people, the stewards of the land on which we work and play, and encourage everyone listening to take a moment to acknowledge and express gratitude for those that have stewarded and continue to steward the land that you live on as well.